Good morning. It's been a little while since I've been on. I think May was probably the last scope we did, and I am picking up today, last Saturday of August. And welcome to Party of One Single Success Book Scope. It is a book that I wrote, and if you don't know me, my name is Luana Helena. Let me flip my camera here. My name is Luana Helena, and I'm the author of Party of One, Single Success. It's my first book. May not be my last. Just got some inspiration the other day for book number 2, but we'll talk about that later. And what I've been doing since January is just coming on the last Saturday of every month. I did that all the way through May and then took a break. And just going through the book kind of chapter by chapter, section by section, and talking about the content. So hopefully if you have a copy, you can kind of follow along. Chances are if you have a copy, you've read it. It's not a very long book. You don't have to wait on each scope to get through it. But just we expand a little bit more, I guess, on Saturdays. Inspiration that has come later on after writing the book, and rather than writing a second edition, just kind of going into a little more detail to avoid being really wordy when I wrote it. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm the author of the book. I'm a retired teacher, English teacher, and the next thing I did after retiring was, after 15 years of teaching, was just to take a break and start writing, myself. So this was the first thing I wrote, and we've just been kind of meeting and expanding and talking about it since then. So we've talked about several parts of it. We started with just an introduction, defining single and defining success, because single by itself sometimes has so many stigmas, negative stigmas attached to it. So we wanted to give it a new definition, and not one that was made up. It's actually still the dictionary definition. And then success also has a lot of definitions to it, not necessarily stigmas. I don't think anybody would have a negative stigma to success, but still, what does actual success look like? So I'll even just run through that again for the benefit of anyone who is new. It's right here on the screen. And I'll just read it. It just says that success, or singles, let's start there, means, and this is a Merriam-Webster definition, having no equal or like, designed for the use of one person. So that one person that I think of immediately is, we were designed for the use of the person who made or created us. Not our parents necessarily, but I believe in a true creator. God created me. He made me with no equal alike. I don't have a twin, and even if I did, it wouldn't be an exact version of me. So I was made with no equal alike. There's only one Luana Helena. There'll only ever be one. And I was designed for the use of my maker, my creator. So that's what single is, pretty much. Okay? Take away the negative, old maid, bachelor, for life, that kind of thing, stereotype, and get down to the actual words. Like I said, I'm an English teacher. I like to know the definition, I like to know what things mean. You kind of need to understand. That's how you gain understanding, by taking the time to look at things line upon line, like the Bible says, precept upon precept. So then we look at success, and of course they say success is one that succeeds. So we look at succeed, which is the verb, and it means to achieve the correct or desired result and to attain a desired object or end. So success simply means you achieve a correct result. Whatever it is you set out to do, or you were meant to do, whatever that desired object or end was, it's met, it's attained, and that is success. So when you put those two together, single, having no equal alike, designed for the use of one person; success, one who succeeds or achieves, the correct desired result, your single success definition is one who, having no equal alike, is designed for the use of one person, God, and achieves the correct or desired result and attains a desired object or end. So you're here for the use of one person, and you find out what it is that you're supposed to do, what is the desired result or this object or end, and then you go ahead and do it. Now, before we go on any further, I want to kind of apologize in advance, because the last time I did a scope, I noticed there were no comments from, well, actually I had a few comments, but from people I recognized. Other than that, I didn't see any comments. But when I went to look at the replay, I noticed there were a bunch of comments going up and questions, and I didn't see them while I was scoping. I only saw them in the replay. So if you're typing anything right now or you're asking and it looks like, oh, she's ignoring me, it's not on purpose. I don't see the comments, so I apologize. If someone else sees them and can address them, I'd appreciate it. But so that's where we were pretty much. We defined single, we defined success. I went through the introduction of the book, which is an event that occurred, which is why I even wrote the book. Kind of got me to think that society kind of views singles a certain way, and let me write this out and try to set the record straight is what I did. So I talk about that event in it was in an IHOP in Phoenix, of all places. That kind of sparked the introduction of the book. Then we talked about redefining single success, and then we got into the 3 things to focus on. Like I said, it's not a very long book. It just focuses on 3 areas that single people can focus on while they're single, and it's probably the best time in your life to do it. And one was to reach goals, not set them. You can set them at any time in your life, but to go ahead and reach them while you have all the time and the resources and everything you need. And that's the chapter we're still on. We're talking about those goals. We talked about education, I think, in May, and today we're moving on to career and ministry goals. Either or both, we'll kind of define those. And the other goals included just financial goals, money. We'll talk about that probably on the next scope. And home ownership should be something, to look into. And all of these goals and pretty much the entire book really just comes from doing a parallel between Jesus's life. He was a single man. He knew he was going to be single. He didn't get married or have kids and go, ooh, change my mind, or I have to, leave them behind or anything like that. He kind of knew from the beginning that he was going to live a single life. So when you know that from the beginning, you live that life to the ultimate, you do it right. So as opposed to if sometimes we're like, maybe I'll be married one day, so let me hold on and wait to do some things. Or maybe I'll have kids one day, so let me wait and, I'll do that then. We always have this later mentality. Someday, we'll get around to it. But he knew this was it. So he kind of lived the perfect single life, if you want to say that. So when I wrote the book, it was kind of a parallel. So the reason I chose education and career and money and home ownership as goals is because the Bible indicates and shows us that these are things that these are goals that Jesus himself reached while he was here on earth. So, why not follow suit? So today, moving on from education, I'm going to take a look at career and ministry, and we can see that he had evidence of both in his life. So we know that he was known as a carpenter at first, and then later on a rabbi or teacher. So there were 2 exclusive periods in his life where it didn't seem like he did both at the same time. I don't think he was moonlighting in carpentry and kind of preaching on the Mount of Olives at the day. Once one chapter was closed at 30, he launched into full-time ministry. Now, for us, it might be different. That's not the path everybody will take. So we see that he started in carpentry, then he went into full-time, complete 5-fold ministry. All the areas of 5-fold ministry, that he operated in every one. He called and trained the first apostles. The people that we call apostles now first followed Jesus. So in order to train them and make them apostles, he had to be operating in the apostolic himself, obviously. So that's one area where he operated in ministry. He also spoke prophetically. Things that he said came to pass. We know that he could look at people and, pretty much tell what was going on with them. And he walked in that calling as well. He taught extensively. That's probably the part of his ministry he's known most for. Everybody calls him Rabbi, Rabboni. We see all these references, teacher, good teacher, and constantly everything when we look back in the Bible, if you have the Bible with red words, all of those are his lessons that he was teaching. And he could also be considered a pastor. He had large followings, thousands, 3,000, 5,000 people at a time, and then he also had small disciples, groups of disciples that he pastored. He cared for them, he taught them, he would teach them further, about the parables that he shared in public and explain them a little more to his small group, or his small church, if you want to call it that. And as far as evangelism, the fifth part of ministry, he evangelized the world. There are very few people, I'm sure, on the planet who have not heard of Jesus or seen some reference to him or know of a Christian who follows Jesus. So we can see that once he left carpentry career, probably trained by his father Joseph, then he at 30 had a significant life change, got baptized, Holy Spirit appeared, voice from heaven, God said, "This is my son." It's like that was official ministry launch at that point. There was no doubt that he was moving in the right direction, and he went on to his ministry. Now, the two are not necessarily always exclusive. An example would be like if someone is a teacher and that is their career, then they could also have that ministry gift of teaching, and they may continue to do that. They'll, teach people about the Bible, about God, about living a life that's pleasing to God, and still Monday to Friday teach English, math, science, biology. So you may not always have to leave one for the other. You could be gifted in a way where your career and ministry are kind of done simultaneously. I think when it comes to ministry, what we tend to do, though, is kind of overcomplicate it. So when we look back at what Jesus called ministry, he saw fishermen at the lake. He called them and he said, "You're a fisherman. That's your career. I will make you a fisher of men." That's your ministry. It was that simple. So ministry, if we're looking for a starting point and wondering, well, what are we supposed to do? Then be a fisher of men. And the best explanation, further explanation of that, as simple as it is, I still got a good further explanation of that from my father. He recently passed away. It's part of the reason I wasn't on the last 2 months. But we got to sit and have a good talk, and he was just saying being a fisher of men is easy if you compare it to natural fishing. A little boy who loves fishing can grab his fishing pole and his line and just go stand by a lake, and he might get one little guppy and he's excited and he goes home and, "Oh, I caught a fish." Then he grows a little older, and maybe as a man he's, "Oh, let me go on a fishing trip." He might have a boat this time, go out into the middle of the sea or lake or wherever, and the guppy is the bait now, and now he's catching more fish. He'll catch a few, take them home in his cooler. And if this man grows up and he really loves fishing and he wants to make it his life and his work, he'll get a fishing company, or he'll go work for one, or, now you have ships going out to sea and nets drawing in fish, and he's selling them, and it's a business. So we all operate on different levels. If we're all called into this ministry of being fishers of men, then you might be at the stage where you're the little boy with the pole and you just kind of go out and talk to, it could be a friend or a cousin, or it's just somebody you know and you're comfortable with, and you just kind of share with them, "This is what happened to me. I used to do this, I do this now, and it's different. You should, give it a try." And you talked to one fish, and then you find that people respond and positively, or you get more inspiration from reading the Bible, or more things that you can share, or more people you can share with, and then it will grow from there. So it's really key not to overcomplicate ministry and get super deep with it, and try to go on these, I'm going out on blind faith, I'm leaving my job behind, and and it wasn't necessarily the time. You will know when it's the time, or if it's the time to transition from one thing to another, or if you are somebody who's meant to do it at the same time. And again, figuring these things out when you're single really helps, because your decisions aren't impacting other people. If you step out and it's an error, and you have to go, okay, take it back, let me go back and reapply for my job or something, then it's just as opposed to you uprooted kids and the spouse, and I feel I'm called to go over here, and then it wasn't quite, what you were supposed to do at the time. So it's not that it is impossible to balance career and ministry, married or with kids, but I think it would be a little more difficult, and I'm sure people who have families would agree. Yeah, it's a little more challenging to make decisions for multiple people than just, for yourself. So, we also know of marketplace ministry. People talk about that all the time. So again, it doesn't have to be stage 1, like Jesus' carpentry, stage 2 ministry, and never return to carpentry. That was his particular path, and that's what he needed to do. But by choosing to have a career initially, he also, was giving us an example. Paul further reiterated that by telling people in the New Testament, work with your hands, don't be lazy. He who doesn't work doesn't eat. So we know that some work is involved, and whether it's career, ministry, or both, we should be doing something at this point in our lives. So Paul himself worked. He is described as a tent maker in the Bible, even though he was going through and planting churches and doing all these things. When he would get to a new place, he would still work. Some people say that translation, sometimes it says tent maker, other times they say the tent refers to the prayer shawl. So maybe he was making prayer shawls, tallit, I think they're called. So he did have career and ministry kind of going at the same time. And I personally heard, like a pastor share, was a youth pastor who worked full-time, and he knew he was supposed to go into full-time youth ministry. There were youth at his church that he needed to serve on a more regular basis. And he says when he left, he knows, he can't explain it, but the full-time job that paid a certain amount, more than he was making as a youth pastor, somehow he left it behind. He had a family. And from that point on, he says he can't really explain it economically and by the books, but every need has been met the same way, in some cases better than it was when he was working full-time and balancing church and everything. Things just worked out, is the way he can put it. And I think that's usually a sign, It's not the exclusive sign, but I think it is a sign. By it I mean provision, having things work out, being able to still meet needs, that kind of thing. It's indicative of being somewhat on your right path, or knowing that you're following God's will. For some people, they say they follow their peace. If they have peace about it, then they go ahead and do it. If everything is provided for, your brook hasn't dried up. And when I say that, I'm talking about Elijah. God told him to go to a brook. He's commanded the ravens to feed him, birds brought him food, and the brook had water, and everything he needed was right there. So he knew he was in the right place because needs were met. So the bottom line for this, when it comes to career and ministry, is that God will always provide, but that is also providing that you are following that path or that will that he has for your life. So don't make rash decisions. Yes, you have freedom as a single person to say, well, let me try this, let me try that, let me see if this is it. You have the freedom to do that, but you also have the freedom to kind of sit still and wait for a while. There's nothing pending. There are no, kids that need to be enrolled in school, and you need to make a decision by August or by September or, anything like that. So if it's just you can sit and wait. You can be patient, and you will know what that next step is. Jesus, again, didn't just jump from carpentry to ministry. We see that he took certain steps. He had a specific encounter with God. I'm going to see if I can find it here. He had a specific encounter with God, like I mentioned before, the baptism that he went to John for, and then coming out of that experience, then the Holy Spirit led him to the wilderness. He fasted for 40 days. So there was a process in transitioning from everyday life and carpentry and living with his family and that life, to going on and becoming that teacher, that evangelist, everything that he was called to do and to be for 3 years before his final destination of, the cross, final destination on earth, which was the cross. So we may not have a big, ethereal sign or Holy Spirit descending as a dove, but I think once we continue to kind of read and operate in the Word of God, pray about things, wait on answers, that guidance that we want, or that we need really, to be a single success will happen. And part of that guidance can eventually be towards marriage and parenthood and, other things. But before that, it's important to just kind of operate in your single life. Don't do that, one day I will, someday I will. Well, when I get married, my honeymoon will be in Hawaii. That's when I'll go to Hawaii. If you want to go to Hawaii now, go. When I have kids, we're going to do this big family vacation and we're all going to Disney World or Disneyland or Six Flags. What if you don't get married? What if you don't have kids? You go to Six Flags, go to Disney World. My father, again, I think when I reflect on the life of my parents, because I knew my parents as married, but they did have a life before me. Obviously, they were single. And now that they've both passed away, I can reflect on their lives, and I think they were both very good examples to me of how to be single, because my mom would tell me of, she was a teacher as well. Every summer, she would go to pretty much every island in the Caribbean. I think I mentioned this in my book as well, that she has been to just about every island in the Caribbean except Jamaica. For some reason, I don't think she cared for Jamaica, or maybe it was too far. I don't know the reason. But, from Trinidad all the way up the chain, Antigua, Dominica, French Caribbean, everywhere. She used to travel. It used to be by ferry at that time. And she would just go. That's what she liked to do. She liked to travel. My dad, every birthday in the more recent years, he would go to Disney World. He lived in Florida, so that was his thing. Birthday, Disney World, stay at the Disney Resort, for the weekend, the day. I don't know how long he did it, and that was just his thing, his getaway. He didn't have to wait and, maybe when I have grandchildren, I'll take them to Disney. He just liked Disney, so he did it. So the revelation I got on that is that now is later, if that makes sense to you, or later is now. All the things that we say, well, later I will, or one day I will, or someday, or when this happens, when that happens. If there's nothing really pressing or pending in your life right now, then that later that we keep putting off is really now. There's no excuse not to do it. Now, that may not be for everybody. There may be things that are more, take higher priority right now. If you're pursuing education, then, get focus on that and get the degree, and, you're trying to save for whether it's a house or a car or some major purchase, then, focus in there. But all those things aside, you kind of look around. Okay, I have a home, my car works, have a job, whatever. Everything is kind of, nobody in my family is really in need or sick or need me to visit, or everything's kind of okay in my life. What am I waiting for? It's kind of the question to ask sometimes. And that's kind of jumping into the next chapter, because we'll talk about enjoying the perks of being single. But right now, it's more about reaching goals. So again, we talked about education as a goal. It's a good time to pursue it. We know that Jesus, as a child, pretty much 13, was in the temple and listening and speaking and, pursuing that at least religious education in his day. And then moving on from there. Again, today we talked about career and or ministry. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one or the other, sometimes it's one then the other, and just kind of figuring that out. And the takeaway or the bottom line, again, is that when it comes to this area, just remember, if you're looking for clarity, look for God's provision. Look for His okay. It's not to say that you will, if the first sign of struggle means that that's not it. But even in the struggle, if there's still provision or there's still, something to help you along the way and get over the struggle, then you're following, the right path. You're following His will. So hopefully that is helpful. Again, the book is Party of One, Single Success. It's available in paperback, which I'm holding up, also as an ebook. If you have a Kindle or just your phone or anything, it's available electronically. And there's an audiobook as well, which you can listen to. If you go to Amazon then search for it, should come right up. If not, go to luannahelena.com. That's my first and last name .com. LuannaHelena.com, and that link is also in my profile here on Periscope. So hopefully this was helpful information, and also when you purchase the book, that will be a source of inspiration as well. Thank you for your attention and your time. I wish you a happy Saturday, happy weekend, and God's rich blessings on your life. Thank you for joining me. Bye.